So this is my presentation on ergonomics and posture, but I'm specifically trying to target the esports community. Let me start my timer. There we go. So these are my objectives. I'll probably be moving this face cam around a little bit just so it's out of the way. By the end of the presentation, I want to make sure that you feel a little bit more informed about how posture and your anatomy are related. And then if you have a good understanding of ergonomics, that will help make it so you can set up your environment better to make it make you more prone to having good posture. And I'll go over that when we get to it. And then understanding the detriments of sitting for long periods of time, kind of like what some of your risks are, and how they're classifying people as sedentary, which is definitely a documented risk. I guess they're just trying to better classify people depending on either sitting time or what have you. And then understanding the importance of spine health, which I'll define when we get to it. There's a few different components to it. And then I'm going to give you just like a few basic exercises that anybody can do, and you can modify them so that you can use them to the best of your abilities. Whether they're too hard, you can modify them to be easier, or vice versa. This again. Okay, so what kind of injuries do esports players get? There's a few different answers on this. Unfortunately, it's not too well documented. So this company that I found, this is a German esports company that they run the esports teams and everything. They say the three most common ones in their experience is carpal tunnel, tennis elbow, and low back pain. But I've reached out to the company you'll see on the next slide, and just on Twitter, just to see what their impressions were. And they were saying that they feel like it's less carpal tunnel and a little bit more just generalized poor posture, since they're focused so much on screen time. And they really want to make sure that they're focusing as good as they can. They're not really focused too much on their posture in general, and they spend a lot of time sitting. Like, these are top level esports players. They spend a lot of time sitting. It is like all day, every day, if they're top players, for sure. So this is the company I was talking about. This is the American company that I could find that isn't. They don't run the esports team, but they help manage esports players' health and posture and their strength and everything. So I think it's 5 physical therapists that run this particular company. I think they work with I can't remember where the team is based, but the Valiant esports team that's on Overwatch. That's who they were working with at the end of last year, so I don't know what they're doing now. But they were kind of saying that basically the esports team will hire people like them, like either physical therapists or athletic trainers. At least in their case, they're physical therapists, and try to improve their overall health so that they can focus and extend their career. Of course, if you have really bad posture and you start your career, you're only going to last so long before you start having medical issues that are going to stop you from competing. And so here I want to make sure that I go through some anatomy and posture so that you get a general understanding of why they're related, just so you can make that connection. Sometimes it helps motivate people. I know that this is particularly the thing that motivates me. So there's definitely like an optimal posture, even though everybody's kind of built differently. There's a certain posture that will optimally affect you, and I'll show you the picture I have on the next slide to kind of show you why that's important. But basically, it will lead to some muscles getting tighter, some muscles getting weaker, and that's if you hold a bad posture for a long period a very long. This is like a chronic thing. This is something that affects somebody for a long period of time. You don't just get bad posture for a little bit and it hurts you, but of course, if you have bad posture when you do something like a lift, then that is important. But this is just for long term that I'm talking about. So I'm going to move this out of the way. So the most important picture I want to show you is the side view of the spine. I would say a lot of what happens when you get somebody who works at a desk day in, day out, or if they do something like in esports where they're sitting a lot, the lower back kind of flattens out. You don't see this nice curve here. It's kind of flat, and then when you look at their low back, it's kind of like what people describe as like a diamond shape, because the muscles that are supposed to be more developed there are more atrophied or not very strong, not very developed. So then you can't hold this posture of your low back. And then what happens kind of on your upper back and neck is having those like rounded shoulders forward like that. If you have your hands out on like a keyboard or whatever, or your phone, this part will curve even more. And then what that does is it will kind of put you in this position, but then everybody kind of corrects by lifting your head this way so you can still see what you're doing. And then so that kind of, it tightens muscles on the back of your neck right here, because you're always like in that position, even though you don't almost even realize it. And then it loosens or kind of weakens muscles and loosens them in your neck area. So it kind of puts you even more prone to holding that position, because your body's starting to like adapt to having that position. And then so your seated ergonomics, I'm going to go over a little bit of just ergonomics in general, but how can you improve your sitting ergonomics at your workstation, or wherever you're sitting a lot. So kind of the main recommendation is just to try to change positions as often as you can. Sitting for long periods of time is the strongest amount of evidence says that sitting for long periods of time is just not good on your health. So really your main recommendation is to try to get up and move, or I thought these are always interesting if you can find standing desks that allow you to change position. So maybe you're sitting and then you've been sitting for a while, so you'll put the desk up higher so you can stand, because standing usually is easier to hold the good posture, whereas sitting is more dependent on your chair and your surroundings there. And it's very easy to just let your back rest against the chair and flatten your back out for long periods of time. And so I wanted this slide to be here because you can kind of see the differences here. So this is the optimal posture, which is you probably, when you're out, if you ever notice how people are sitting, I would say most people aren't sitting like this. But it is the optimal posture for your back. So I actually have one of these, and I recommend getting one because they're cheap, and you can put them on any chair that you end up sitting a lot in your house. And then this is kind of like the typical position that people have. It's probably an exaggeration, but you can see how it's not the typical. You want like a curve forward, backwards, forward, and then backwards. And then you can see that with the forward head, this curve is less, but then this is an extra amount of curve, and then your low back has less of a curve as well. So it's one of those things where you can improve that just by improving your surroundings. So this is pretty much the one that I have. I just put it on my computer station chair, and it helps me a lot. Just by reminding me. It's like I get the soft one, but you could probably get a hard one if you feel like you need the support right now, but I recommend just a soft one to start off with. And it's just a reminder to remember to kind of keep your hips probably from rolling backwards. You don't want your back to flatten out against the chair. You want to have your low back forward, but then your shoulders back, so you're kind of more in line with where you want to be. But the other things you can change, like we were going over before, is the height of your monitor. Like you don't want to be looking up at it, you don't want to be looking down at it for your neck's sake. And you don't want to have your chair too high or too low. You want your feet kind of planted on the floor so you're not sliding forward to get to it and then slumping forward like you saw in the picture before. And then the height of your desk, you don't want to have your arms way up to get to the desk, but you don't want to have it so low that you're reaching forward to get to it either. All right, I'm going to skip one and I'll come back to it. So spine health I defined as having good posture, and then also making sure that your core strength and your flexibility is optimal. Obviously, if you're somebody who's not doing a lot of lifting or manual labor, you don't really need to be super strong, but you do want to make sure you're not weak in certain areas, otherwise your posture is going to suffer and your overall spine health is going to suffer. Let me go back to there. So why is sitting bad for you? The strongest amount of evidence says that you can kind of classify people into the sedentary category by the amount of time that they spend sitting. That's not super strongly proven yet, but there's a lot of evidence on it. So, I mean, I think they're leaning on that statement pretty heavily. But there has been a good amount of evidence, like this is one of 7 studies put together, that suggest that your calories burned in your overall day is a better classification of how sedentary you are versus your sitting time. So, just kind of one of those things where, there needs to be more research on that subject to prove or to confirm what is a better classification of it. So these are the exercises I picked. A lot of these are kind of mirrored by that 1HP company. They picked a lot of the same thing, but they had a modified version of it so that you could do it at your desk. So it's like more likely people will do it instead of doing nothing, or doing none of them, I mean. So hamstrings, I personally have tight hamstrings because I do a lot of sitting between school and gaming and, like hanging out, maybe not being the most active person with all that stuff. I have tight hamstrings for sure. So this is the most comfortable way for me to do it, is just kind of make sure your back is as straight as you can and then bend at the hip. Don't let your back bend, and you bend at the hip and keep that knee locked right there. And you bend into it, hold it for 20 to 30 seconds, and do that 3 times in a row. Do it like a couple times a day, maybe when you wake up and when you go to bed. And then the prone press up, he has his elbows locked, but you can do it on your forearms too if that's too intense, or if your back, with any of these, if you get like a sharp pain, don't do them. But if you have any sort of background issue, like maybe you were born with some sort of back deficit or hip issue, then you're going to want to get specific exercises that are modified for you. These are just general exercises that will help everybody. So he's you're resting your hips down on the bed or the table or wherever you're doing this, and then you're letting your arms do the press up. And then so that's another one where you're going to hold it for 20 to 30 seconds and then rest and do that 3 times in a row, either the beginning of the day, end of the day kind of thing. And then this is the core strengthening I recommend. So you can just do planks to start off with, but then if you feel like that's too easy, you can try to lift a foot and see if you can still hold it. This is the amount of time that I recommend, but again, just modify it to the degree that it's challenging, but not challenging but achievable. You know what I mean? You don't want it to be so bad that you just can't do it or you're hurting yourself doing it. And then so squats, I recommend having a chair behind you so that you have the right posture, because sometimes when you do squats you'll just go straight down, which that's why they put that line there, is they don't want your knee to go past your toe. The common thinking is that that's bad for your knees right now if you do it a lot. So just pretend like you're going to sit in a chair, but then you're going to come all the way back up, and that's usually the best kind of squat, and that helps hips, back, knees. It's just an overall good core strengthening exercise. These are my sources. Like I said, this 1HP company actually has a lot of stuff written in like a blog post kind of style, which is easy to read, but it has a lot of information specifically for if you spend a lot of screen time, or if you're like seriously considering esports as like a career, then they have that information specifically for your health in that context. So really good really good group, I think, for sure. And then so email me at this email address if you have any questions, or contact me on Facebook or wherever if we're friends on Facebook, or you can ask me in person. All right, thank you very much.